Good afternoon and welcome to the next episode of Level Up Cyber. I am your host, Tony Bryan, Executive Director of CyberUp, and I'm very excited for today's guest, Ryan Craig. Ryan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Tony, good to see you.
So let's just jump into this. I'd love you, just for everybody who may not know who you are, just to do a quick, do an introduction of yourself.
Sure. So my day job, I run a firm called Achieve Partners, which is one of the leading investment firms, private equity investment firms in the workforce development space. We also invest in ed tech, but where I tend to focus is on the workforce development side. And what that means specifically is that we are buying companies and transforming them into talent engines for their sectors through an apprenticeship type model. So we're buying, for example, a Salesforce company, a Salesforce partner or a Workday partner, and then building a large scale apprenticeship program within the company, so they become a producer of Salesforce admins and Salesforce devs to the Salesforce ecosystem. And we've done it now about 8 times across software development, data analytics, Salesforce, Workday, healthcare IT, and cybersecurity. Actually, we're just getting started on that as well. So, and then that work has led me to help co-found, along with Bob Lerman from the Urban Institute and Maryland State Senator Jim Rosapep, Apprenticeships for America, which is a trade association for apprenticeship intermediaries, for example. So recognizing the importance of intermediaries, we're now 200 intermediaries strong in AFA, working together to help scale apprenticeships across the economy. And then you can see my last book behind me. I have a new book coming out in the fall called Apprentice Nation: Why an America of Apprentices Will Be a Stronger, Fairer Country, and How We Get There. So I'm excited for that as well.
So I think the two of us could probably nerd out about apprenticeship for a really long time, because it's something, and I think for the good of the group is that the work that AFA does is beyond is just cybersecurity apprenticeship. I know in our first call there were things around accounting, healthcare. There's a whole myriad of apprenticeable thing, and I think the consistent that I love to hear, and I try to echo often, is like apprenticeship is an incredible option and pathway, I think, for most, and it's just one of those that hasn't. We've seen it have incredible success, and maybe some European companies, obviously the UK and Germany, and I think the goal for work that you're doing in AFA is really how do we have that same level of energy here in the United States to drive that. So how did you get involved in this world of apprenticeship? Right, I know my journey, but how did you jump into apprenticeship and get started?
Now, again, with Achieve, we're an impact fund, and the goal is to help close the skills gap and experience gap in America. I write a biweekly newsletter called the Gap Letter, and a lot of what I've written about is the fact that we've got 11 million unfilled jobs out there, and we somehow 40% of new college grads are underemployed when they graduate. So there's obviously a mismatch between our very college heavy approach to career launch and the labor market. And so AFA is really a response to that. It's if you look at how, as you mentioned, the UK and Germany, you look at how other countries have scaled apprenticeship beyond construction, and it's pretty clear how they've done it, which is to say, in no country have they relied on companies, employers, organizations simply launching apprenticeship for altruistic reasons or simply because they need talent. Launching an apprenticeship, by my count, there are about 10 different things that a company needs to do if they want to launch an apprenticeship program. And any one of those 10 things is, potentially a deal breaker. We're asking a lot in terms of resources and cost and time from a company that obviously is, producing, its primary objective is to produce a product or service and generate a return for our shareholders. So the idea of hiring and paying unproductive workers for a lengthy period of time probably doesn't enter into the equation for 99.9% of employers. And that's what we've seen. So, how have apprenticeships scaled? Well, they've scaled where you have intermediaries who do the heavy lifting, who perform, most of those 10 functions for companies, for organizations, making it a much easier lift for companies to say yes to apprenticeship. And that's true in Germany, where chambers of commerce and unions play that role primarily. And that's a role that, if you look at it, is actually written into statute, which is why I believe that Germany is not a very useful model for what we're going to accomplish here, because we're not going to do that. But the UK and Australia are. If you look at where they were about 25, 30 years ago, they were pretty much exactly where we are today, which is to say, 70, 80% of apprenticeships clustered in construction trades and a relatively small sector. And now today, Australia and the UK are 8x where the US is in terms of apprentices as a percentage of the workforce. And the way they got there was a smart government policy that recognized the importance of intermediaries in setting up and running apprenticeship programs and incentivize them. They incentivize them by fully funding, or in some cases overfunding, the related technical instruction RTI component, so that training is paid for, more than paid for, and then providing additional incentives for intermediaries for every apprentice they train and place. And that brought hundreds of new players into the game, setting up and running apprenticeship programs. So in the UK today, you won't find a mid-sized or large company that hasn't been approached by 6, 10, 12 different apprenticeship intermediaries knocking on the door, offering to set up an apprenticeship program for them and help run it. And that doesn't exist in the US today. In the UK, you have a association called the AELP, the Association of Experiential Learning Providers, that numbers about 850 intermediaries for an economy that's about 1/5 our size. So, we should be, 4,000 intermediaries. As I said at the top, AFA has 200 today. So we have a long way to go. And we have a long way to go, in part because we've significantly underfunded apprenticeship. If you look at how we fund college relative to apprenticeship, college receives about $400 billion a year from federal and state governments, flow to accredited colleges and universities. Apprenticeship receives less than 400 million. So that's 1,000 to 1 ratio. If you compare a given apprentice, someone who's actually working as an apprentice, compare that individual to a college student. That college student receives $50 of taxpayer money for every dollar that the apprentice receives. So it's a very unbalanced approach, and it's one that AFA hopes we can help bring that into greater balance. And I think if we do, our vision is we want 4,000 apprenticeship intermediaries running around helping employers set up and run apprenticeship programs. And if we can do that, we think we've got a shot at, getting to, call it 4 million apprenticeships a year, up from the current 500,000. So 8x, which would, and that would take us right where the UK and Australia are. And if you can think about what that would mean that for most, high school graduates, community college graduates, there probably are available apprenticeship opportunities for them, to enter a wide range of sectors. Apprenticeship really becomes a normalized path to career launch, and that I think that will do a whole lot of good for the country in terms of economic opportunity, socioeconomic mobility, geographic mobility. The list goes on.
Well, what's interesting, right? And that's incredible insight. And interesting to hear just the scale of, the number from UK, and just thinking about the size of economies and what our actual true needs would be was interesting. It was great to hear. But also, like, if we take a step back and, from 2020, the world of work has changed, right? Like they're a younger generation that is reimagining their own pathways. I think, I'm a knee deep in Gen X, and college was the only option I had. Right, and I was from a young age, college, and that became pretty standard for 20, 25 years for folks, that it really is the only way that you're going to go and make anything of your life. And if you choose not to go to college, you're destined for failure for the rest of your life. And we've obviously learned that's not the case. But I think the idea of scaling just not traditional education, but also non-traditional kind of pathways is an important part, I think, to highlight for students and still have the same equitable opportunities to good career paths. Do you think COVID has had an impact, or just having 5 generations of work, four generations of workers currently in the workplace I think has thrown this to the forefront of a lot of people's minds around reimagining workforce?
Well, I think COVID, colleges, I think going through a number of crises, and certainly the shift to remote learning, college continuing to charge full tuition was not helpful to college's cause in that regard. In addition, I think COVID helped to emphasize just really that there's a huge premium now on digital jobs, right? Jobs that can be done remotely. And the fact of the matter is that college does not do a great job at preparing students for those digital jobs. It's not. Cybersecurity is a perfect example. There are a handful of cybersecurity degree programs out there, but many would say that those degree programs aren't actually preparing students to work in the cybersecurity jobs that are available. And even if they do, the jobs that are available are asking for the equivalent of 2, 3, 4 years experience. So there's still this disconnect. An apprenticeship model like yours is really the ideal way to prepare students for a career launch in this space, because apprenticeship uniquely solves the skill and experience gap. And the other thing I'd add is that apprenticeship it's not just an alternative pathway. It's actually the only pathway that truly levels the playing field, because it's the only pathway that doesn't require tuition and debt. So it's inherently available to anyone, regardless of their background. A pathway that pays a living wage and has built-in structured training to get you from point A to point B, where point B is higher wages with all sorts of career paths. That should be something that we make available to everyone.
I know when we first got into this 5 years ago, I had 3 universities on my board represented. And I think there was this initial concern around we're promoting non-traditional, we're promoting different paths. Well, what about us at colleges? How do these two things intermix with each other? Are we, saying college is bad? And I think it's always been our stance is a skills path is a skills path. Helping a student or a young person figure out what is the right skills path for them, because some people might want to go do the college route. We were talking right before we hop on. I have 4 children. Some are pretty gung ho in college, and some are not. And so it's just finding the right way to go and do.
Look, apprenticeship doesn't have to be an alternative too. You can have an apprenticeship out of graduate or professional school, right? Lots of our apprenticeship programs are hiring college grads into the apprenticeship programs, because the pathways into, for example, working in Epic healthcare IT, that's not clear. There are no colleges that offer a training program in Epic or Salesforce or Workday. So apprenticeship is actually a great way to launch a career into those sectors. Now, do those students need to have college to qualify for that? No, they don't need to have it. Obviously, someone who's been through college is probably going to have, more developed cognitive skills, problem-solving skills, that are going to be helpful in the role, but it's not necessary. The challenge we have right now is just we have such a lack of apprenticeship infrastructure. Every apprenticeship cohort that our companies launched, I'm sure this is true for other intermediaries in the AFA network, we have hundreds of applicants for these seats, and the explanation is easy, which is you're offering a paid pathway with training to an awesome career. Our apprenticeship programs, they deliver, in terms of seat time, the equivalent of a master's degree. But instead of charging $60,000 for it, we're paying, we're paying them for it. So it's pretty attractive. So, again, it doesn't have to be an alternative to college. I think in time, as the infrastructure builds out, it will become an increasingly an alternative to college. But for now, we just need to focus on that, building out that infrastructure and making these opportunities available to millions more young Americans.
So I'm going to add a question that I wasn't on the script because I'm kind of curious your thoughts. So we've seen this boom, this apprenticeship boom, I would say, in the past 5 or 6 years, right? 6 or 7 years ago, the first kind of grant came out, and it's been exciting to watch because it has been party agnostic, which is great. It's been funded and supported by both, but we've also had this huge rush, right, of incredible amounts of programs that have jumped into this space. And you and I both know not every program is created equally, right? Because there's so many different ways. And I think I know for me, it's actually made things a little more complicated as we're having conversations with employers. They've heard it 3 or 4, maybe 10 different ways from other organizations where apprenticeship is meant to somewhat be similar across the board, at least the structure and makeup of it. Do you see that kind of gold rush into the world of apprenticeship starts to flatten out a little bit and get more focused on?
Yeah, I don't see it as a gold rush. What I see it as is the Department of Labor has funded hundreds of millions of dollars in what I would call paper apprenticeship programs. Now, not all of them are paper apprenticeship, but I mean apprenticeships that primarily exist only on paper. So, for example, a lot of that money has gone to community colleges, where what the community college has done has been to develop an RTI curriculum, register the program, and make it available to employers. But for employers, that's kind of the least of it. No community college is offering to help employers with the hardest part, which is hiring and paying an unproductive worker. At AFA, we're interested not only in supporting intermediaries, but supporting, sort of moving intermediaries up the value chain from what we call low intervention intermediaries that might just do 1 or 2 of those 10 things, like a community college, to high intervention intermediaries that do 8, 9, or 10 of them, to the point that you can have a completely turnkey program that is delivering trained, productive talent to employers at the end of the program. And then having employers pay for it then. And that's where we think the biggest leverage is. So I see there's a lot of activity, a lot of interest, but not a huge growth in actual apprenticeships. And remember, apprenticeship it's not just training, it's a job, which means that somebody has to hire this apprentice and pay them. And that's, again, where AFA comes through. We're an organization of intermediaries who are either actively marketing apprenticeships to employers and helping them, or in many cases serving as the employer of record.
And that's a great segue to my next question is, I'm familiar with what AFA is doing. I'd love for you to tell, because there's multiple facets to the work that AFA is doing. I'd love to have you expand on what that is, and if there are groups that maybe want to get interested or get involved, what would that look like?
It's great. Well, I think we have everyone, but I'm sure we're missing some. So, you can reach out on the apprenticeshipsforamerica.org website. We'd love to have other intermediaries, if you're not already in the network, to join. But effectively, there are 3 functions that AFA is performing. There's a research function where we're helping to sort of get the word out about what intermediaries are and what they can do. There's an advocacy function where we're focused on helping states and the federal government understand how they can do more to support apprenticeships and actually launching what we call paper apprenticeship programs, which is shifting from this grant-based funding where government is trying to pick winners to more predictable formula-based funding. Can you imagine if we funded college the way that the DOL has been funding apprenticeship? Meaning, like, you're giving grants each year to a handful of colleges and universities, and every other college is kind of on their own. No federal financial aid. That's not how college works, right? For college, the funding flows with the student. Same thing should work with apprenticeships. So the RTI should be funded, and apprenticeship intermediaries should get paid for every apprentice they train and place in a full-time job, a good full-time job. So that's what AFA is focused on, and we can already claim a victory of sorts in California, where California has just announced a apprenticeship innovation funding, where starting this year, intermediaries registered in California will receive between $3,500 and $4,500 for every apprentice they train in place. And there are other states that we're in conversation with who are interested in following in California's footsteps in that regard. So that's a great start, and that's how you really begin to create this apprenticeship ecosystem. And AFA is also doing other things as well. We have a grant to help create a California community of practice, basically a network of intermediaries to help interface with the California Division of Apprenticeship Standards on this new program. We have a grant to establish a community college apprenticeship initiative to help build a roadmap for community colleges to understand how they can go from being low intervention to high intervention intermediaries. And we're also doing work to help the Department of Labor as well as state apprenticeship agencies understand how they might streamline their registration processes. So all this is in the works, and we're about to announce our initial foundation supporters. We have support now from 6 different foundations.
Well, I know I'm excited about the work. I've had the opportunity to see all the things, and I think what I'm seeing California do is huge. It has big implications, and I think it helps standardize, I'm gonna say, definitions, because I think with the buckets of money that were put out there over the last several years, I think there's been different ways to measure what apprenticeship is versus what it isn't, and there's a lot of pre-apprentices that were maybe counted as apprentices, and not necessarily as many of those.
On that. That's the problem is that too many folks in the world of apprenticeship have come out of education and training, and they just view it as another sort of education or training program, and it's not. It's a job, right? You're either hired and you're getting a W-2, or you're not. And if you're not, it's not an apprenticeship. It's just a training program. And so pre-apprenticeship that's a training program. You can call almost anything a pre-apprenticeship. It's not a job. So again,
I'm looking in the mirror when you say these things, because I've been echoing and stopping my foot. You have a much larger megaphone than I do, but I vividly remember a conversation one day. It's like, man, I really wish we just had this tool that tracked apprentices. And I'm like, you mean Rapids? Like,
Rapids is not useful because it's full of, and I know this because for my book, I put together a directory of active apprenticeship programs that are actually hiring actual apprentices outside of construction. And to do that, we had to wade through, thousands of these paper apprenticeship programs that, again, as I say, exist on paper, but aren't actually hiring apprentices. So not useful.
I'm excited for a consistency of language and just a consistency in the messaging of all of this. And I'm thankful we're on the right side of where I think it is headed, because that's what we've been echoing, because we've gone back and forth multiple times on our end around just training, right? Like, do we lean in only exclusively on the apprenticeship side and not do training and align with others who do training? But what we have found is that a skills path, pre-apprenticeship, community college, 4-year, whatever, all those it's a very important piece, because it gives somebody a baseline set of skills that at least allows them to step into an apprenticeship and be productive pretty quickly without as much ramp up as it would be as coming in cold. So that part's been, which is where we've stayed. And to your point earlier, we've never really had a person problem, right? Like, because what we're offering is free
No, that's
education and a free
that's the point, is that again, we really need to focus our attention on building apprenticeship infrastructure, meaning building apprenticeship jobs. Worrying about pathways to apprentice. We have so few actual apprenticeships, apprentice jobs available, that, like, let's not spend time and energy on the pathways yet. Let's just build out the infrastructure, and then once we have, 1 million new apprenticeship jobs, then we can worry about pathways into those jobs. But until you have the jobs, worrying about pathways to those jobs is kind of a, I call it a child in the pedestal problem. Meaning, if your goal is to get a toddler on a pedestal reciting Hamlet, right? What do you focus on? Do you focus on finding a child and teaching them Hamlet, like a prodigy child, teaching them Hamlet, or do you focus on building a nice pedestal? And we're doing way too much. We're spending way too much time focused on building that pedestal, and not enough time focused on the major bottleneck here, which is lack of apprenticeship jobs.
Yeah. So with that, where do you see apprenticeship over the next year or two, or what does right look like for you?
Yeah, look, I think we're going to have in a couple of years' time, we're going to have a number of states that are following California's example. I think it's going to be you're going to have a lot of new activity in the space. You'll have a bunch of very large, I think, companies with great reach that will be launching apprenticeship intermediary businesses. Meaning they're getting into the business of what you might call hire, train, deploy. So these would be large staffing firms: Adecco, Allegis, Kelly, Manpower. You can see all of those large solutions and services firms like Accenture and so forth. I can imagine them doing this as well. This is going to be a burgeoning industry, just like we saw in the UK and Australia 10, 20 years ago. That's exactly what's going to happen here. And AFA helps to, we hope to help accelerate that, but it's inevitable because it just makes so much sense. And frankly, everyone we talk to, on the left, on the right, even in traditional higher education, they get this. It makes sense. Our current approach is just way out of whack, way out of balance. We need to begin investing more in apprenticeships, and that starts again not with just more grants of $6 million to community colleges. Community colleges aren't employing apprentices; they're not. So we need to focus on again the bottleneck, which is apprenticeship infrastructure, apprenticeship jobs. Who creates them? It'll be intermediaries doing that work.
Yeah, I know last year when the cybersecurity apprenticeship sprint kicked off, Centene, who's been a big hire of our apprentices, the question that was asked of their CISO was, well, what is the goal of this sprint? Is it really just a large awareness and marketing building type of thing, or is there going to be incentives for organizations like mine or Centene to get into this and to make it more of a focal point? So, I mean, it's kind of stuck with me. And I think what I'm hearing you say is, that maybe a goal here is that, we're leaning in on just the job creation aspect more so than the training and preparation, which I think has been a large focal point for the past 5 years.
Absolutely. Let's focus on what's important. And what's important is that we get, hundreds of thousands more apprenticeship jobs to be hiring diverse candidates who otherwise wouldn't have a pathway into these sectors because of skills or experience gaps. That's the beauty of apprenticeships. Apprenticeships solve both in one fell swoop.
So one last question as we wrap up, and it's the same question I ask every guest, right? And it's intended, what would be one piece of advice that you would give, a listener here today? And it's, and I keep it broad. It doesn't have to be a career seeker or whatever, but just a good piece of professional advice that you would give to somebody.
Professional advice for someone interested in sort of helping to scale apprenticeships?
Yes, that's perfect.
Yeah. I'd say, get involved with AFA. We'd love to have your help. There's a lot going on. And so, you can reach out to us through the AFA website. That would be great. Strength in numbers.
Well, Ryan, I appreciate you joining us today. Two, I truly appreciate all that you and AFA you guys are doing for just the idea of apprenticeship across the country. It's important work. I'm proud to be part of it, through the work we do at CyberUp, but also just excited to see where it goes. And for those that will join us next week, very excited to have the CISO of Centene, Alan Berry, join us next week. They've done a really great job of taking a large organization and a big cybersecurity team and mapping that out in very specific ways that has allowed things like apprenticeship to be kind of scaled across their organization to do it. So he's going to share a little bit about how he has built out his teams and his infrastructure to not require every person that comes into the organization to have a degree, and really make it universal, and gets buy-in from his hiring managers, buy-in from his talent acquisition folks, and from his leadership, because he's proven time and time again it's working. So be sure to join us next week. But again, Ryan, thank you so much for joining us today.
This was really fun. Thanks so much, and congratulations on all your success.
Thank you. Have a great week, everybody.